All right. So you want to read for us? You
Sure.
want to set the stage first, a little bit?
Yes. Um, Blood Sapphire's Revenge. We have a very Staff Sergeant Hattie Abrams is one of the finest snipers in the world, and she's called upon to um, eliminate a Al Qaeda terrorist in Yemen. She makes an incredible shot, not knowing that in taking this guy out, she has put herself on a path. There's a man called X, a Ukrainian oligarch who hates. He's Jewish, but he hates his people. He wants to destroy them. When he finds out what what has happened to his golden boy, he sets his enforcer out to get Hattie. And not knowing, now there's another thing. Hattie herself is really, she's been struggling with issues of suicide all her life. There's a deep current of nihilism in her life. She's very philosophical. So she has decided to kill herself when this op is over. She's taking herself out. As it turns out, she is prevented at the last second from doing so. And she feels like, in essence, God has kind of intervened. And now she's kind of back at base going, wow. And she's invited out to go dancing with this, hunky guy. And in the process, a jihadi blows up the place. And the last we see of Hattie is she's being blown up against a wall, knocked into unconsciousness, and 3 days later, she wakes up in the intensive care unit. And her face has been badly, badly injured, shredded. She goes through all of this thing asking, essentially, God, how could you do this? How is this possible? And then she discovers that someone is out to get her. She has no idea who it is. And so she goes on the run. She says, I don't know about what is happening, but I've got to escape. So she goes on this this venture to escape, save her life, and in the process keeps getting pushed back to her destiny, which is to meet X, the man who we find out killed her father 27 years ago.
Wow.
So she's been looking for X, didn't know who he was. X been looking for her, and now they're set on this collision course. So this is halfway. This is in the ocean. Well, this begins the Mitsubishi Ramon Special Operations Base in the Sinai Desert. It's Israel, Monday, October the 9th, 0400 hours, and it's at 4 a.m. And we find her getting ready to escape this special ops base. She's been put there for her protection. And now she's figuring a way to get out of there because she believes I'm not even safe here. So she ends up going down to Ashdod, the port of Ashdod, and she said, hidden behind the aviators and hailing the bracing early morning breeze, Hattie strolled down the walkway. She walked to the end of each pier, examining a four-masted clipper ship, schooners, and yachts. As sunlight flickered off the polished hulls, she noticed a shiny white cruiser at the end of the last pier. The gulls were calling and diving when she heard noise behind her. An army vehicle had scrunched to a halt. Soldiers hopped out, intent on a search. Damn it, that was fast, she said. Hattie hastened to the low-slung, sleek cruiser. Gold letters on the stern announced Austria, Roma, Italy. 50 feet long, trimmed in blue, gold, and teak, the boat bobbled in the waves with a tied-down mast. The rig looked like a modified cigarette racer. A rigid inflatable raft with a 60 horsepower Yamaha outboard laid lashed to the back with a small winch. No bikini-clad women or men in wide-brim hats or bright Hawaiian shirts lounged on the roof. Two roughnecks manhandled small wooden crates into the hold. They worked noiselessly, focused on the job at hand. Hattie glanced over her shoulder at two soldiers talking to a yacht owner 2 piers away. She stopped at the Astria's gangplank and addressed a swarthy, 40-ish, barrel-chested man with a tangle of eyebrows. A cigarette dangled from his lower lip. Hattie adjusted her voice and asked innocently, "Are you going to Rome?" He gave her a quick glance. "No tourists here," he replied brusquely. His partner, a young, muscled seaman, pushed past him. "We port in Civitavecchia on the coast," he said with eager eyes. "Rome's inland." Hattie watched him stare at her figure greedily as he continued, "Where's your family?" "In Florence, but I want to spend time in Rome," she said. The seaman's teeth flashed. He said quickly, "Talk to Captain Dimas. He's in the wheelhouse," and stepped aside to let her by. As she ducked into the wheelhouse, she overheard the older man growl, "Get your head out of your pants and get back to work." And Hattie glanced back and saw the young seaman making curves in the air. And so she ends up talking with the captain and ends up being taken aboard the Astria, and off they go into the ocean, into the sea. And above deck, the seaman released the ropes. Now there's another person on board, another third seaman, and we'll meet him in a moment. And the skipper engaged the engines. The ship shuddered. Hattie had a passing knowledge of cigarette racers, and they sounded like twin Mercs. She recalled each engine churned out between 1350 and 1550 horsepower, depending on the racing fuel. The captain swung the Astria to open sea and opened the throttles. The propellers responded like thoroughbreds at the starting gate. The gleaming hull skimmed off the 1-foot swells. Hattie locked the cabin door and tossed the satchel on the floor. "Big business, my ass," said Hattie to herself. "Drug runners, more like it." And she heard her best friend in the back of her mind say, "You're on the run, thumbing a ride with scum. Be careful, sis. I'm not there to watch your six." So they move down, they continue, and she knows she's in danger. It's 3 o'clock in the morning the next day, and the Astria floated quietly while Hattie slept with one eye open. At 3 a.m., the engines gurgled and the lights of the port city faded from her window. Hungry, she stole into the galley. The wheelhouse door lay ajar, and she overheard the captain say, "The syndicate won the bid." And the seaman replied in tandem, "How much?" $48,000. But when Piaro sees her, "I think more," said Captain Dimas. "We'll take her tonight in Marsala. Warn Xuthus, no touching." A cold wave of fear spiraled down Hattie's spine. She crept back to the stateroom. She practiced breathing, calmed down, but her stomach continued to growl for food. An hour passed, and Hattie opened the door. The engines roared and the waves splashed as the boat sliced through the water. She steadied her movements against the bouncing by keeping her hands on the wall. Cool air met her face. The odors of food and carnauba wax mixed together. She touched her Glock and the knife tucked in her waistband. A single light cast a dim glow over the stove in the narrow, deserted galley. Balancing herself, Hattie planted her feet on the tiled floor as the vessel bounced and swayed. She filled a bowl with stew and tossed in a loaf of bread. Hattie heard a rustling behind her and whipped around. Xuthus had the same idea of an early morning snack, and in the soft light, Hattie's silhouette stood out. The big man downshifted the first gear. His motion slowed as two small eyes fixed themselves on the woman like lasers. He put down his plate, the size of a tea saucer, in his hand, and stepped towards her, mesmerized by this shiny toy. Xuthus reached out, his fingers inches from Hattie's face, and speaking in a high-pitched cat-like meow, said, "Let me pet your hair." Hattie instinctively sidestepped and bumped against the stove. Her right hand went to the pistol while the other pushed the lion's paw aside. "Not today, big fella, or ever," she said. Zuthu's eyes hardened and his voice darkened. "I want to pet it." And with surprising quickness, the giant stretched out his arms like albatross wings and boxed her in. He towered over her. "The captain won't hear. Don't scream like the others." Hattie's chest seized in panic. Her body became mush as her worst fear materialized like a ghost ship from the fog. The Glock had no legs. The knife had no hands. Zuthu squealed in the light and put his palm on her head. Then he grabbed one breast. And like a magician's fire, Hattie's rape flashed up. She was falling under blows from long ago, tied up and spread open for this giant. The claustrophobia clamped down her throat. Zuthus touched her pelvis. Suddenly, in her chest, Hattie felt the fiery lightsaber come alive and an inner voice say, "When you hear the blast of war, summon your rage and strike like a tiger." Like an explosion from a cannon, Hattie's hand shot out, aiming for the back of Zuthu's throat. Her fingers sliced through his skin like a paper bag. They stopped at the spinal cord. On their way out, the fingers snapped shut like a bear trap and ripped out the windpipe, arteries, veins, and all. Blood sprayed like water from fire hydrants over the ceiling and walls of the galley. Zuthus turned pale, his eyes glazed over. The giant toppled like a redwood and landed on the floor with a loud crash. A pool of dark blood spread out beneath the Leviathan as the skipper rushed in and yelled for his mates. And we'll stop right there.
Wow.
Good.
If that doesn't make you want to read the book, nothing will.